This conference will now be recorded.
Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and start the meeting unless there's anything to consider for this evening's agenda. Okay, there being none, move on to item number 1, requests or comments from the public. There being none, we'll move on to item 2, consent agenda. If there's anything anyone on the council would like removed, please let us know now.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop.
Yes.
Malott,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Item number 3 on the agenda is considering the following recommendations from the Edwardsville CPS board. Consider a motion and to recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 75-4319B6 for preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property related to the historic cemetery restoration project.
How long do we need?
10 minutes. That.
So moved, coming back at 6:15.
And just for the record, we'll, the assistant city manager will be joining us.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk
Well, I assume you're
please
gonna
call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop,
Yes.
Malott,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Yeah. You have whatever we need, don't you?
Regular
This conference
meeting.
will now be recorded.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
And no action needed.
Second, please.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop,
Yes.
Malott,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Item 4, consider ordinance 1066 authorizing the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds for the CIMI 3 LLC project.
Well, as you know, I am not your bond attorney, but Mr. Anderson has had surgery recently, and so his movements are a little limited. This is a pretty straightforward item, but I'll just give you a little bit of quick background. As you know, we created a TIF down in this general area back in end of, I believe it was 21, actually. Then in April of 2022, we adopted a resolution, that would be resolution 2022-06, which was our intent of issuance of bonds, IRBs. Again, as you all know, we don't really issue a bond. There's not a buyer out there. It's the individual buys them. In that document, 2 things that are critical to remember. Number 1, there is no ad valorem taxes on that. There's no exemption to ad valorem taxes, so the taxes are still paid. And number 2, that the bonds have to be issued by July 1st of 2023. So what this ordinance effectively does is it does authorize that issuance of the bonds. It authorized up to $2.5 million, so they have to provide the receipts for those expenses. It authorizes the mayor to be the signatory on the documents that are necessary, and it authorizes basically the city clerk and the other staff as may be necessary to sign any documents that are appropriate. So fundamentally what it does, it provided a sales tax exemption for materials during construction, which again was part of our development agreement. These bonds will be sold. The cost of Mr. Anderson's fees are paid for by the applicant. And so there's really no expenses to us. And we would ask that you approve the ordinance 1066 that's before you tonight.
What kind of business, commercial industry, commercial is it?
This particular one, it is a food distribution business, very, very similar to Dot. I don't know if he's put it out publicly, but it's actually a company that's moving here from Oklahoma. So they have operations in Texas and Oklahoma now. They want to expand it to the Kansas market. So he's built this building. They're taking about, the building is actually 6,750 square feet. I think around 4,000 feet they're going to take for their offices, et cetera. Then they have trailer parking on the lot, and then the rest of it will be another tenant with some additional parking. And of course, as part of the project, they have done, that's the roads and all those things, which again goes back to the TIF. We've been doing the sewer portion of it, but they put in the sewer lines. We're putting in the lift station and force main. Again, all of this was kind of outlined in the bigger development agreement. This just kind of wraps up the part. Otherwise, if you don't have the bonds, what happens, then the state will go back onto that person and want payment for all the sales taxes. So without the bonds, he would be subject to paying all those, whatever those sales taxes are on a couple $1 million, or probably at least $1 million in materials.
Mike, after making a little trip down there with you, I'm kind of happy with the process or the progress that's going on.
Yeah.
down there. I think
It's a nice building for the size of it. I think they've done a nice
possibilities
job.
down there for the rest of it. How's the electrical part? Is that
I'm not,
from
the
enhanced?
electrical, there's, I'll tell you, there's two outstanding issues. So when he put together all of this, the electrical, the electric company gave him a proposal of what those costs were by the electric company, I mean Evergy, to get it from the main pole to his site. The developer is responsible to put all the conduit in. There's sectionalizers and a pad. The electric company pulls the wires and sets the transformer. That price about doubled on that particular item. And then the other thing is the sewer part of it, which we have, as you know, we have a contract company to do that, but the lift station comes from Smith and Loveless. And we're kind of asking, right now they're saying a September delivery, which is not going to be acceptable. So we're working with them to find out why that can't speed up. But that technically is a contract between our contractor and Smith and Loveless. But
I just wanted to, with the way prices are and everything is right now, I don't think we should even hesitate on approving this ordinance. So I make a motion to ordinance number 1066, authorizing the issuance of taxable industrial revenue bonds for the CIMI 3 LLC project.
Second?
A motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Item number 5, hear presentation regarding quarter 1 budget review for 2023.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this will be our first budget review for the fiscal year 2023, done in the same format that we performed these for a number of years now. So we're going to start with our major sources of revenue in the general fund in the first 3 months of the year. Starting with property taxes, our 2023 adopted revenue was 2.8. We are now sitting at about 1.7. So we're pretty much right on line where we typically are at this point in the year. A little bit behind, but 2% behind where the previous 5-year average is. This year and last year, I've noticed that for whatever reason, delinquent taxes are coming in at a smaller rate at the early distributions, and they kind of catch up as the year goes on. So I don't really have any concerns with how property taxes are performing at this point. Again, we're at 1.7, about 57% of adopted revenue. Sales tax, we are performing ahead of where we thought we would be, slightly ahead. We're typically at 23% of our audited revenue at this point in the year. Right now, we're at 25% of our budgeted revenue. We budgeted 1.9, a little bit less than 2 million total for sales and use for city and county. We are at a little less than 500,000 at this point. City sales tax, 140,000. County sales tax, 207,000. City use tax, 77,000, and county use tax at 58,000. Our use taxes, especially in the city, are performing above our trend lines from the previous 5 years. So that's always good to see. Sales tax continue to be strong at this point. not wildly out of range, but we're performing pretty healthily January through March. Franchise revenue, adopted revenue of 512,000. We are just at about a little more than 125,000. We're about 126,000 overall, ahead of our average in both the percentage of final collection and then where we are at this point in the year from a dollar standpoint. We're actually even a little bit further along than that because we did have a $17,000 franchise payment from Evergy Metro that was for March but was not distributed and accounted for in the general fund until April. So we're actually, as far as total collection goes, closer to 140,000 franchise fees. There was a little bit of a period there in 2021 where after the we've talked about it before, but after the consolidation between Westar and Evergy and whatever it was, it ended up being Evergy. Those rates were a little bit harder to track, but those have normalized to the point where we've got a pretty good handle on them. Gaming revenue, that's another one where there was a downturn after COVID, but we are pretty much right back to normal as far as regular rate of return for our gaming revenue. A little bit ahead of where we typically are for a dollar value. We're usually at 199,000. We're 109,000 collected so far, which represents 25% of our estimated revenue of 435. So again, if we're going to have a little bit of a downturn later, we're at least buoyed by these stronger showings at the beginning of the year. No reason to think we're going to have a downturn, but it's always good to pad it early in the year in case it comes up. Court fines. So again, for this one, there's a lot of variables that go into how much court fines are collected. Really, the easiest and the best way for us to get our heads around it for a budgeting perspective is a rolling 5-year average. Last year, obviously, we had a bump in that, but those numbers weren't audited, so those weren't included in our rolling 5-year average for 2023. We are at 34% of our estimated budget of 388,000. Typically, we are at 25% of our estimated total, which makes sense, 25% into the year, but I fully expect we will exceed 388,000 and probably be a little bit closer to our 2022 ending number, which was in excess of 500,000. We might not be quite that high, but the trends don't seem to indicate that we're going to be slowing down from court fines. We have recently hired our part-time court clerk, so that frees up our police services clerk to focus on police services duties. But we've got enough activity to support at least another half-time person, but we're grateful to have the part-time person in there now assisting pretty primarily in the docket management piece of the operation. Ambulance fees, we are at 21% of our adopted budget of 172,000. We're currently at about 36,000. We are in a bit of a transition period between our previous billing company and our current billing company, but also, if you remember, we started off slow last year just due to some of the distribution models that are in place. We'll likely catch up. Even though we're a little bit under where we typically are from a percentage standpoint at this point in the year, it's not so out of whack that it's really presenting anything troubling at this point. We're a little bit ahead of where we were at 2022 at this point, and that really caught up in the last half of the year. Motor vehicle taxes, it's down from where it was in previous years, but this is based on a formula that we get from the state. And using that formula, we're still at current collection of 35,000. We're still at 23% of what our estimated total is going to be. So whereas it might be a little bit less than what it's been previous years, I think it's going to be right on budget, which is what it typically does. We actually tend to exceed that budget a little bit. We'll just see how it goes. But again, while it may look under the average line in previous years, we're kind of right where we typically are at this point in the year for motor vehicle taxes. Overall general fund reviews, typically at this point in the year, we are at 36.8% of collection for what it will end up being our total revenue at the time the audit comes. And I've got 2022, that column in yellow, that's highlighted. That is obviously unaudited, but we will be, our audit, we got a preliminary audit back from Gordon, which we expect to be presented to the city council. If not the next meeting, then the final meeting in May. So we're using those numbers right now, which puts us a little bit over 7 million in revenue collection for last year. But right now, using our total revenue estimate for the general fund, with current collections, we're at almost 40% of that collected revenue. So we're performing stronger if that number is to hold than where we typically are at this point in the year. Like I said, not wildly out of whack as far as some of the numbers coming back stronger than usual, but 1 or 2%, pretty much all of our major revenue sources is always a good place to be 3 months into the year. From an overall general fund expenses, we are at 23% of our budget, which is a little bit less than what our previous 5-year average is, a little bit more than we were at in fiscal year 2022. Again, that final number in 2022 was unaudited, but this is typical to where we are usually at 3 months into the year. I think we're doing a good job from a budgetary standpoint and keeping things under the line where they need to be. Any questions overall in the general fund so far? I mean, not a whole lot to report. There's not been a tremendous amount of activity outside of regular course of business. So, and none of the numbers at this point seem to indicate anything's strange or needs additional attention. So we're pretty happy where things are heading up right now. So not seeing any questions. General fund overall, that's another snapshot of that. About 2.9 million collected in revenue of our 7.3 million budget, and then 1.7 million in expenditures of our 7.5 million budget. A question was asked a couple weeks ago about looking at payroll vacancy considerations, really to see if we are what kind of, I'm going to put it in quotes, savings that we are incurring due to some vacancies, budgeted vacancies. So these are kind of overall numbers to try and get our heads around that, with the caveat being, when we budget, we make certain assumptions as to the vacant positions, as to their level of benefits. We always assume high on that, and sometimes those come in low. We're actually assuming on some of these items, our help will go up to a certain degree, which sometimes doesn't bear out to the level which we estimate it. And also, we had some grant funded positions that were built into the original budget that we were not successful in getting. So some of that is backed out as well. We just don't budget under the assumption that we will be fully staffed from January 1 to December 31. So this is a real moving target throughout the year that we keep our eye on. But 3 months into the year, if you take our budgeted payroll and benefits, so the first two columns, and look at where those numbers are at 25%, and then our quarter 1 actual, all that added together, we are ahead as far as savings go, 234,000. Now, backing out those payroll those grant positions, payroll and benefits that we had built into the budget, but we're not successful in getting, backing that out of it, we were about 144,000 in payroll expenditures that ostensibly would have been paid 25% into the year. The other consideration, though, is overtime. So when we do have these vacancies, then you got to move people around to get those filled. So when you back that out, at that level, we're at about 118,000 of budgeted payroll fund, estimated budgeted payroll funds from January to March that, quote unquote, we saved in that amount of time, which represents about 2% of the overall payroll and benefits budget. Again, we had on the admin side of things, we were down our customer service clerk position, which was the new position, but it was budgeted to start January 1. Been down our finance position for all year. Have had our part-time deputy court clerk position that was unfilled until just recently. Some positions over at the fire department that were unfilled through the first quarter that some of them were still looking to fill. On the admin side of things, we're going to be fully staffed hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. So, that gap's that's gonna tighten up, especially once we get a better handle on what the level of benefits are going to be. But as far as, if you just take broadly, we're 25% into the year, 25% of our budget is this number. Where are we at in the difference between that number? And it's about that 2%, 118,000. I don't want to attach too much, importance or significance to that number, because that just gets backed into our the city's fund balance, our overall general fund balance, which will get reported on at the end of the year for next year's audit. But we were asked to kind of attach some of those numbers to that time frame, and this seemed to be the most linear way to do that. So any questions on that front? So looking at the other funds for revenues and expenses, our debt and community investment fund, which I'm calling this year, that's really what it represents, is what's the level of investment that we're going to be making into the community with some of these long-term projects. We haven't had any expenditures at this point. At the point 3 months into the year, we have made payments for the first half of our principal in April. So that'll show up at the next budget report for second quarter. But revenue kind of tracks with what the general fund's doing as well. A lot of those share. That's just the other side of the equation from a revenue standpoint.
Before you go from that one, and you see it here, it's a nice visual, and it was, a decision we made specifically is we know our revenue is above what our debt service is. As you recall, we made that decision to kind of hold that line so that we could build this reserve up a little bit for future projects to be able to, hold our mill levy constant in that level. So I know, you look up there, but that's intentional. So just reminding us of that fact. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Special sales taxes pretty much follows the same trends that I reported on earlier for sales taxes, because that's the special sales tax levied on the city and city sales and city use. So those continue to come in strong. We've had some expenditures out of there, some fire equipment, some Parks and Rec equipment, and some Parks and Rec contract stuff related to riverfront development. But again, nothing really unexpected to come out of that fund that we've had to cover, at least not the first 3 months. But that's where special sales tax sits right now. Special highway, our budgeted revenue in special highway at $203,000 accounts for the state and the county allocations that we will get, kind of baked into that formula that the state assigns for us. What it does not assume is the $100,000 in sci-fi funds, which we have received in April. So that's not reported in that $103,000, but we have received the $100,000 from sci-fi from the county. So going forward, there's going to be an ongoing dialogue about what exactly that formula, the distribution formula, looks like as sci-fi hopefully gets baked into the regular county operational budget for distribution to both Edwardsville and Bonner Springs. This year, I think they just came up with a number, and then we divvied it up between the other two communities. We ended up with 100,000. So once we add that 100,000 in, we're actually going to be at our budgeted revenue for 2023. So we will exceed that as the other regular forms of revenue come in. What is reported in that 103,000 is an additional, a little less than 50,000 from the developers behind the Groves development. And now that's specifically earmarked for basically sidewalks as that project starts to come together. So that was part of the arrangement that was worked out with them. So that is in that 103,000. So we're ahead at 50% of revenue. Essentially, we're ahead of where we typically are at. We've got kind of extra sources of money coming into the special highway fund. Some of them earmarked for specific purposes, specific projects, and others being that sci-fi funding that we're going to need to be working on with the county and our partners over at Bonner Springs to firm up that equation going forward. Nothing really to report out of the Economic Development Fund, and the expenditures in there are mostly related to some of our different memberships or chamber events or things like that. So we didn't really have any projects budgeted out of economic development, so nothing to report there. Solid waste, so this is trash recycling. Our revenue's coming in ahead of expenditures at this point of the year, which is good. Things are pretty much on track where they need to be in order for us to hit those budgeted numbers. Not a whole lot to report out of the solid waste fund so far. Sewer is pretty much the same story, where this is typically where we're at from a revenue standpoint at this point in the year. We'll keep tracking it, but at this point, again, knock on wood, unless we have some kind of major maintenance project or emergency repairs that needs to happen with the sewer system, then we should be below that budgeted expenditure line item. That 853,000 kind of assumes, I don't say assumes, but accounts for, let's say $60,000 in unforeseen maintenance or repairs that might happen with the sewer infrastructure. So
I would note on the sewer fund, just generally, y'all know, we have a contract with UG for our treatments. That 5-year cycle basically ended at the end of the year. We've been in discussions and negotiations. I think we have come to a reasonable solutions. It will impact rates, which we didn't have a rate increase really for 5 years from them. So we know that there's going to be some adjustments in that, but for the most part, the contract continues as is. There's a few things that they felt they wanted to put in there. I felt the answer was no, I guess. So we went back and forth, but we'll be back probably with that contract in May, and then we'll look at where our fund is, but we'll probably have to make some adjustments in sewer rates. Maybe this year we might be able to defer it till the first of the next budget year. We need to look at our reserves and kind of see where we're at, but may have to step it in smaller steps. So again, we didn't have any increase for 5 years, so at least from them, right? So we have to look to see how that will impact the overall rate structure. But I just bring it up because it will be before you here.
So that's kind of the budget snapshot so far, 3 months into the year. So we are going to be looking at fiscal year 2024 budget planning. Really the official kickoff for that is our audit report that we will get in May. And then after that, we're kind of off to the races as far as putting together the 2024 budget. That's kind of the preliminary calendar we've got put together so far. Obviously, we're anxious to get those valuation data from the county in June. And then from there, we'll start looking at our forecasted revenues for this year, forecasted revenues for next year, R&R considerations, all that fun stuff. So that's kind of what the rest of the summer and fall looks like from a budget development standpoint. So other considerations as we do get into that budget development standpoint, as we start to get our heads around what some of council priorities are, what staff priorities are. One is ARPA funds. We still have all of our ARPA funds that we need to expend by the end of 2026, entirely spent, not allocated, but we need to have a kind of a solid plan around that. I know we were waiting on just a little bit more clarity from the county side of things, which I think we've got a little bit more of, but I think it's a little bit more involved than kind of them just cutting us a check. But that notwithstanding, that's their money to figure out how to spend. Our money to figure out how to spend is $685,978.14. So we chose the standard allowance, which essentially frees up the use of that. I mean, there are some restrictions. We can't just, got to have some programmatic use essentially is really the best practice for it. So as we get into the budget year, we've got this pot of money of a little more than $500,000 with a pretty wide latitude as far as how we can spend it. So staff has obviously got ideas that we can use for it, but as we start to put together the council priorities for 2024 budget and the rest of this year, what are possible uses of these funds that's not going to affect the general fund, property taxes, and some of the other kitties of money that we got sitting out there. This is $685,000 that we've got, like I said, wide latitude to kind of attach our own priorities to. It's a really good source to start and finish certain projects too, depending on their size.
Zach?
Yes, sir.
Question on the ARPA funds. Can we use those? We read where cities use it for the weirdest stuff, but can we use that to supplement our street fund a little bit?
I think within reason we could do that, yes. I mean, I think there's certain ways we could couch a street project that would satisfy some of the ARPA requirements. I mean, not having any specifics, I don't want to say for sure one way or the other.
Yeah.
But I think that's a possibility, yes.
The use of the dollars around infrastructure are generally permitted. Some of the things that aren't permitted are retirement, funding a retirement program or some, what I would call more of those personnel types of expenditures, right? So normally they need to be broadly project related, right?
Richland
Well, I'm sure
Yeah.
Richland will be a discussion period, but,
I was gonna save this one till the end, but there's some CARES Act money that we're supposed to be coming into at 1.4 million or something?
I think you're thinking of the additional county ARPA fund. So all the CARES Act money is gone and spent. So that's been allocated to the projects that we've gotten authorization from this body over the last however many years. So that money is essentially expended. So CARES money was a different
Okay, I didn't
funding
know
source
which
from the
one.
federal government. That was essentially that emergency type allocations. That's all been spent from our side, and I believe the county side of it too. So I think what you're talking about, that 1.4, is that unallocated ARPA money from the county that they had, different entities make application for, and our contention was, well, you're funding these other KCK city projects, and what about our projects? And
Oh, I can't even put a fence up on the side.
yeah.
any other questions?
That's really a different
That's the
discussion
way I
that y'all
feel.
probably need to have.
Right. Now, again, the clock, as it were, really matters to us only for that 685,000, because we need to have all that expended by the end of 2026.
We can figure that out.
Oh yeah, we can do that tonight probably if you want to, but
We can do that with one tractor,
yeah.
one fire truck.
Well, again, I think what I think we're trying to stress there is it's expended, not allocated, not right. So sometimes federal funds are like road project. What they care about is it's allocated in a particular fiscal year, but you may not spend the money till a later time. And do we have to have it allocated by 2025?
2024, I believe, is the allocation obligation.
Right.
Yeah.
So allocate is, there are still some times in there, but allocated is there's a project selected, you've gone through a process, you've selected a contractor as an example, and you have a contract in place. That's allocated. Spent means they've completed the project and you've written all the checks and everything's done.
And
So
there's other, I can maybe, as we get kind of into the budget year, put together just some other examples of what other communities have set it up for. I mean, there's been examples where they're setting up a homeowner's kind of grant fund for facade improvement or things like that, where they carve out a certain percentage of their ARPA allocation for folks to make application for. Now, the caveat would be at the end of 2026, if we still have $25,000 and we need to have something else to spend it on, otherwise we're going to be cutting the federal government a $25,000 check. But I mean, there's project uses for it that I've seen. There's some of these programmatic uses that I've seen. There's employee retention bonuses type things that I've seen used for that money. There's these grant programs seen for the money. So there's a lot of examples out there if you start to look at how people are using it. And because we've taken the standard allocation, the standard allowance, I should say, we've got, we can get a little bit creative as far as how we want to approach the use of those funds. Any other questions on ARPA? Next thing is really that special sales tax expiration, which happens at the end of next year. So, ideally, we're going to be checking with the county as far as the timing for getting this on. This will be a ballot question that needs to be posed to the voters. We're confirming the timeline and the calendar requirements that we need to have to get it on the ballot. At this point, if we can get it on the ballot for this year, then we'll see. I kind of worry that we're a little bit tight on that time frame. On if we want to make tweaks to the special sales tax as far as how it's allocated, if we want to have it be able to use for broadly public safety, including police, for example, or if we wanted to include or have different thresholds for uses of it. Those are the kind of tire kicking exercises that we would need to be doing before we put it out and put it on a ballot. So I think around spring of next year is kind of our drop dead date as far as getting, here's the goalpost that we're working within for the special sales tax extension. And then how do we kind of communicate that to the residents?
So I just have some update that I got late today. So, there's in Kansas, there's 2 uniform elections, right? August, which is your primary elections, and then your November general elections. You can do special elections, but pretty much all those costs fall back to whoever calls them. You can do a mail-in ballots, so that's an option that can be looked at, right, where it's a mail ballot. But just for the regular election as it relates to this year timeframes, to be on the primary election, everything would have to be submitted to the election administrator, commissioner by June 1. And if you wanted it on the general election, it'd have to be by September 1. Though as of right now, based on the election administrator, there's unlikely to be a primary election. That could change, right? But as of right now, there may not be a primary election, because that's all based on how many candidates file for specific positions. If there's not a primary election, then, and you had an election, this would be considered a special type of election, then those costs would all fall to us, and we don't want to do that. I mean, from a cost, just the cost of the election, because you're right. So just to keep those things in mind. Now, I will say, and I know timeframes are always a challenge, is, the good thing about doing it in the current year is you kind of have other options. Say it were not to pass, as an example. If you do that in late 24, your tax is going to terminate, even though you may have an election and restart it. So it's a timing from that standpoint. It's not something we have to decide tonight. Just wanted you all to know, because I know it's come up a couple of times, those dates. So June 1 to get it on the August, September 1 if you want it in the general election. There are pluses and minuses to being tied up in a general election, especially federal election years. But this is not a federal election year. And again, you can always, and we can look at what those costs of a mail ballot election as well, which a number of cities have used that very successful. It's really about education. Really, all of them are about education.
Does it cost anything to put us on the general election?
It only costs, so the cost is only if there's any cost above what the regular election costs. So you might pay a proportional share. Generally, on a general election, it's negligible, right? Because where it would come into play is like if they had to print another page on the ballot, you would have to pay that extra cost of that extra page, but you're not paying for the election workers and the ballot places or any of those other costs. Those are all set already. So you only pay what the above and beyond with the regular election, which is why you generally try to tie it with some type of an election. If you know there's going to be a primary election and you already know that, then it's great. The problem is your time frames fall pretty much at the same time, right? I mean, they won't necessarily know whether they're going to have a primary election until probably June. And that certainly, I don't think is enough time for us to go through the ballot language. That's something that this body will need to look at. Here's our existing ballot, the language that was on that ballot. And if you're going to change that ballot language, then right, that needs to happen. There's probably some benefit to doing that. I don't think anybody's talking about changing the rate of it, right? We have a half cent allocated. You certainly could, but I mean, if you continue with the half cent, you're just changing probably the ballot language for use potentially. So we can come back to that, but I just got that literally just right before the meeting. I sent something to the election commissioner earlier today, and he got back to me this afternoon. So
I think it'd be good to have that language in our hands so we can mull over it.
Sure,
and
we can get
think
that.
about it.
Yeah, it's the language from the last ballot, right? We can get that to you. That's not a problem.
So again, we're kind of at the front door of really putting together the 2024 budget. What I can tell you just broadly from a staff priority point of view is, we want to continue to make investments in the city infrastructure. So streets, city facilities, public spaces, some of the projects that we've already talked about at this level, continuing those and making sure that we're making the necessary investments into the city. this was brought up before from the council, but, focus on employee retention and recruitment. And so we were always looking at where the city stands from a competitive standpoint as it relates to compensation. So monitoring of that and adjustment of that where appropriate this summer is going to probably be, something that's going to be recommended from a staff point of view, just to keep us in the mix for some of the talent that's out there. And then again, providing that where we can find appropriate tax burden relief for residents, certainly want to seek that out as well, as keeping in mind trying to keep everything balanced with the other priorities that we've got as far as investments into the city from an infrastructure standpoint, and then talent retention and recruitment from a compensation standpoint. But I think we've tried to put the onus publicly that there's other taxing entities in Wyandotte County who've not necessarily followed our lead in lowering the mill levy for the last 5 years, which we've done pretty consistently. So I think it would be nice to have that be part of the broader conversation that the city has really been shouldering a lot for Edwardsville residents, has been shouldering a lot of that tax burden relief, really at the luxury of these other taxing entities who've not necessarily followed suit. So we encourage them to find those appropriate tax burden relief opportunities, just as we have in the last 5 years. But that's the staff priorities. It's your budget as well. You're the ones who give us the final authorization for it. So communicate your priorities to us as we start to have these different budget workshops. Our budget workshops are really going to be built around, here's how much money we think we're going to have at the end of the year, and here's the broad level type activity that we're going to be doing next year. Not dissimilar to what we've done in the past, but if we want to focus on certain areas of that as we get into the budget workshops, please communicate to us so we can have numbers to answer your questions and be able to kind of get to those solutions at the end of the budget process that everybody's happy with. So that's our budget report for the first quarter of the year. Any other questions?
One thing that I would mention, and Zach, you touched on it a little bit, is every year a lot of the entities will say, well, look at them, they're raising their taxes, look at them, they're raising their taxes. And for years, the UG has discussed having all the entities in one room for discussion. I know we had something similar to that with the UG about 5 years ago. I think if we're going to do that, it would be beneficial to do it before everyone decides whether they're exceeding revenue neutral or not. Like, that's when they're really making their big budget decisions. So I wonder if it might be a good time to just see if they're serious about it or not. I know the UG particularly brings that up every couple of months, and I don't know if they've heard from anyone else, but the community college, the library, the school district, we've got a lot of different people pulling from the same basket here.
Mm-hmm.
So
We can reach out to them and just, broad, see what the level of interest is and if I would be willing to have a broader group meeting.
I think to your point, whenever it's been brought up to us, we were always like, hey, we'll have you at the community center. We got a space for you. Just tell us where and when, and let them kind of take the lead on gathering everybody together. But we'll certainly follow up to see where they're at on that.
We'll follow up. We'll kind of reach out to the key people at each of those entities, right? Elected appointed people, right? And kind of build a little distribution list and then get the feedback, see what we go.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Before we move to the next two items, just for as a reference, right? So we do have 2 executive sessions because the executive sessions are of different topic matters. We'll go into it if you choose to. We'll go into the executive session for the real property item, right? Then we will come out of that one. If there's any actions to be taken, I don't expect there to be. You can rule on that. Then you would go into a new executive session for the legal, and there's, I think, 2 items that'll be discussed in that one, which that's fine. You can discuss items within the same parameter. Just we can't. I fear the question might come up. Why don't we just go into one executive session? They have to be separated because they're of different topics under different pieces of statute. City attorney could have probably given a much more elaborate discussion, but that's generally the rule.
Makes
So,
sense. So item number 6 will be considered motion to recess into executive session pursuant to KSA 754319B6 for the preliminary discussion of the acquisition of real property related to public works facilities.
Can you announce who will be included in addition to the mayor council? As part of the
So
motion.
we'll have city manager, city attorney.
Yeah, that should be it.
Okay.
Yeah. And 7:15 would be sufficient.
You ready for so moved?
Yes.
So moved. 7:15, return at 7:15.
We need a second.
We need
We need a second,
Yeah, I'll second it then.
Are we awake?
We have a motion and a second. Will
We already did.
clerk please call
Yeah.
roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes. Hey, Zach, he said that the link online is not working. That's great out. You know how she is.
This conference will now be recorded.
And then Brad came. I'm gonna split it up with content. Just you guys want to, God's sake.
15 is more than enough. You want to say,
Move to regular session.
Second.
Okay, we have,
You're missing some.
oh, we need some voters.
He
But
votes
we've got
yes
the
to fight this
motion and the
motion.
second.
He's a
We got
remote-
thumbs up.
He's a remote council member. He's technically present.
He's voting by mail.
Yeah, there, yes.
And we need Mr. Bishop, I believe.
Yeah.
I think he is,
He got a quorum.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk slowly call roll?
Adams,
yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Make a motion, we go into executive session pursuant to KSA 754319B2 for the consultation with the city attorney, which will be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship concerning a matter of potential litigation, including the city manager and the city attorney and the city council.
Did you say 15 minutes? Is
7:30?
that what you said?
Let's go 7:35.
We have a motion and a
Or
second.
wait a minute,
Oh, sorry.
7:35.
Yeah, 7:35.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll?
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat, Scott.
Yes. Yeah, these plastic shoes, they don't even make that Bates brand stop making them. I had to go to a different brand.
This conference will now be recorded.
Somebody got a second?
Second. Oh, did you make the motion? Yeah, sure, second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call roll? And that was Garrett Mott and Mark Bishop.
Adams,
Yes.
Bishop,
Yes.
Malat,
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Okay. No action, so we're moving on to item number 8, conduct a review of city manager recruitment processes and consider potential selection of a search firm. Just kind of explain what we're doing so far. I've been blowing up everybody's email for quite some time in regards to this item, and that has included proposals from 6 recruitment companies. The motivation behind it is just making sure that we are doing due diligence as residents and some on the council have requested, and making sure we're casting the broadest net possible to recruit a good selection pool of candidates for the city manager position. These folks do this on a professional and expertise level that would pull away from our current staff. And so a lot of these companies, actually, Mike had recommended as well that we reach out to the one that he didn't so much was a GMP, and that was primarily because we don't do a lot of work in this region, in this area. I had just noticed some brochures and then kind of reached out to them just to get some numbers, and then sure enough I noticed, just like said most of their work is in Washington and Oregon. So I know that you guys have had a lot to look over. I reached out to these guys and said, hey, can you send me information regarding your services for city manager recruitment? And I sent you everything they've sent me as far as their proposals. Then I looked at their references or the cities they've worked in recently, especially focusing on the ones in the area if I could find any. Reached out to their governing bodies or their referrals as well, and I've forwarded all of this to you guys so you could see where they've worked recently and in the feedback they've gotten. A couple of them, it had been quite some time since they helped their city, but seems like they were happy with the overall outcome. The goal is hopefully we can move forward in our search with city manager and get the ball rolling on it. If you guys have any questions or discussion as far as that goes, we can. I know Mike's got things if we want to move forward with any of these groups, if we want to put out an RFP, we can do that. He said that would push us back about a month in our timeline. And if I am understanding from what Mike said, this is basically the information, if not more, than we would get from an RFP. So you have a lot of information that I'm sure you've been looking through over the last month. I don't, Mike, if you have anything to add or.
Oh, I mean, you know, all I would add, I think as far as the group of firms that those, you know, I think 4 of those are ones I had said. I think the only one that's not in this group, and I don't know if they, you know, you reached out, they didn't respond or whatever. Baker Tilly's the other company that has done searches in this area. And again, I don't, you know, they're good. I mean, I don't think any of these firms are firms that couldn't perform the job. It's really what you as a group are going to have to decide who fits the organization and kind of what you want to achieve. I think the processes will be fairly similar. I think if you read through these, you know, each one has a pretty similar process. Some can be more sophisticated than others. So that'd be about all I would be able to add. You know, if you put out an RFP, I mean, it's a good process, right? It makes it consistent. I would imagine you would get these same firms. You might pick up a couple others. I don't know who those would be. There's a lot of firms out there. You know, some of them are just individuals. You know, I'm a retired city manager and I hang my shingle out and you know, I do searches. Obviously, we've talked about other options, but other than that, I don't really have anything to add. I think it's a matter of discussions.
So we can all come to the table and just discuss.
Well, I feel like we can, that's why I felt like we could just do tonight if we wanted. I mean, just discussing ultimately it's something we need to get moving forward, but that's why I was bringing it tonight. So we could just have discussion on moving forward, taking the next steps. I know the timeline has been a concern or moving closer and closer.
Well, that's my question is like, what is exactly the next step? I mean, you know, I don't know that we're all really on the same page. The material I got today was really too late for me. The brochure stuff that you sent out today was I think was a little bit too late unless I missed something.
Yeah, I sent the brochures a few days ago. Today was just a couple of additional reviews that came in from other council members. But yeah, that was a few days ago. So the next step would be if we want to move forward, would be hiring one of these firms. And then what they do is they kind of walk us through that process. So we're not reinventing the wheel, so to speak, since we don't do this on an everyday basis.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I didn't know
But
that
they
we
would
really
walk us through
we're
it.
ready to make that kind of a discussion tonight. I'm not. I don't know, whatever. I'm not speaking for anybody else.
A couple of questions. One is, have we decided to use a search firm? Number one. Number two, have you established a search committee to review all of this information so that they can have input from all those different groups?
So I think the search committee, and this is why I was hoping to look into hiring the firm, is because they lay out the process for it. And then from there you bring a search committee, or they would come talk to council and walk us through the process. Since we don't do this on a regular basis, that's part of what we would be bringing them in to do, is walking us through these steps. But the preliminary step would be looking through, finding the search company, to move us through that and start the process.
I think that we would need a price, I think, to find out, what the variations are on the cost. I mean, just like Mike said, could be a smaller one versus a larger one. And would that be part of the RFP process?
It could be. I mean, I think you will see in most of these, in my opinion, that the pricing, for the most part, are, they have a price and then they have some travel fees. But I would say, broadly speaking, most of them are around the $30,000 total cost process.
Yeah,
That's what I believe.
So do you have prices?
I do, and those were emails.
Yeah, they're in the
to everyone as well.
proposals.
So they were in the proposals, and then I did like a just my own kind of tool sheet, side-by-side comparison. So Raftellus was, I can give you kind of a basic rundown of what I've got here.
Like 15,000 up to about 34,000. Kind of what I was.
Yeah, the lowest one was the GMP, and that was the one that Mike said he didn't recommend quite as much, and it wasn't on his list because they were almost full in Washington and Oregon. But the other ones were close. Raftellus was 30,000 plus advertising, background checks, and finalist travel. They start with developing a candidate profile, gathering input from governing body, department heads, and staff, and then they develop a recruitment plan. They would put together a position profile brochure, first year goals, conduct outreach and initial screening, strategic advertising with their database and outreach. They'd conduct candidate interviews, and then they'd give us a summary of like the tiers of candidates and where they would fall. Then we move on to assisting in negotiations of employment offer, compensation. They didn't have a guarantee with theirs. Several of the companies have like a 1-year guarantee where for some reason that person isn't still here for a year, or one of them had 18 months, that they would redo the process and the search for us just at like the expenses, but with no fees. GMP, like I said, was a little bit cheaper, but that one was almost all Washington. GovHR is a group. Oh, sorry. Raftellus, they're a national company. They had some Midwest recent searches. Some that they listed was Edgerton, Johnson County, and Olathe. But some of them that I reached out to, everybody was happy with them, but some of them were kind of older. They were from a few years ago. GovHR is who did the search for the UG County Administrator recently. They also are a national company. Their references were primarily Iowa and Minnesota. And just my experience with them is most of the candidates they brought in were actually from Cincinnati for the UG position. Their base was $24,500 plus consultant travel, candidate travel, and accommodations. They start with position assessment, position announcement, brochure, and timeline. They next would work on advertising, recruitment, personal outreach. Then they go into candidate evaluation, screening, questionnaire, video interviews, help with appointing the candidate, assisting in negotiations and employment agreement. And they again have a 1-year guarantee. The Mercer Group, oh, you know what? I skipped a whole back to this page. They have the internet and social media searches and references contacted, presentation of candidates with recruitment report and electronic portfolio, interview process and background screening, the candidate files, and then they develop and coordinate the 2-step interview process. That was GovHR. Mercer Group, they just sent like a 1-page, like real quick response. They didn't give any references for me to send to you guys, so I don't have that, but they do let me start on the front page. Start at 24,000 plus reimbursable expenses, which they figure is about 5,000 to 6,000, so they're going to end up around 30. Start with position analysis, develop brochure, targeted advertising of position, do candidate search, resume reviews, telephone interviews, develop a short list of candidates. Social media and background checks, interview packages, candidate reports, interview questions, coordination with selecting candidates. If we would like them to help in negotiating the employment agreement, they'll do that. They didn't have a guarantee listed, and they didn't have any references for me to follow up with. Ralph Anderson starts at 30,000, then they add travel, additional references and background checks. They start with reviewing project management approach, initiate communication and establish a timeline. Then they go on to develop position profile, gather information regarding experience required, work development, develop a brochure. And then they go on to outreach and recruiting, accelerated ad campaign and candidate identification.
I know you've wrapped your head around this quite a bit.
Yeah.
Obviously done a ton of research and appreciate that. Do you have a recommendation of these? I mean, there's 6 of them here.
There's 6 here. I think like when talking to Mike, the GMP seemed like it, and with my experience recently in the county administrator search, a lot of the applicants that came in were from their pool of applicants from previous job placements. And so say they had a job, which Cincinnati, Ohio, they placed that recently. And so the people that were in and around there, they kind of reach out to that base. And that's why I was really focusing in on the national. I think it's important to have national reach, but also to have Kansas and Metro reach as well. That the SGR seemed like for the price, they were the only one that had a not to exceed. It was not to exceed 24,900. And then the other things that would potentially come up for that is only ad placement, and that's if we approve it first, and then candidate travel, and they said on that we can help like coordinate that to save money. But they had the most comprehensive program where it seemed like they did really a deep dive into not only the needs of the community, but the governing body. The screening process was very, very thorough. They had something called a first year game plan during the interview where they would talk to every governing body member, department heads, and then with the candidates and get a first year game plan back from the candidates. What do you expect your first year would look like? What would you want to accomplish? But it seemed like there was just a lot packed in there. And the reviews recently with Shawnee and Ottawa folks that I think a lot of you guys probably are familiar with, just fantastic reviews from them, but for the price. And then they have an 18-month guarantee instead of a 12.
And which one was that?
That was the SGR.
SGR.
Yeah. So they were about $5,000 less than the others, but had the most local reach, but still at a national level. They were the ones that gave, okay, this is what jobs are currently being processed, but then 2022, 2021, 2020, and had all the list of the cities they worked with really recently. And so I was able to send y'all some reviews from this.
Mike, do you have a recommendation?
Well, I think it would be hard for me to make I don't know. I think this is a pretty good summary. I would say most all your firms are going to have a guarantee established with it. They may have not mentioned it in there. The list I gave to the mayor, just so you all know, was Rob Tallis, which used to be called the Novak Group. So they've done a lot of work in this area, but most people know it. Julia Novak was she's still the president, but they merged. I've never worked with GMP. The gentleman that owns that firm previously had a firm called Prothon, and so that firm's still in existence. I think he's been doing it a while. It's a new firm. I have never worked with them or know them, but they do tend to have a that upper Midwest focus, which not bad, but I'm just it worries me about when they talk about travel and the cost of travel. What does that mean? I mean, some of these are probably questions you would have to ask these firms, maybe in some interview basis or however you wanted to do that. I've not really worked with GovHR. I mean, I know they've done a number of projects around. They're pretty well known. Mercer Group is one that's been around a long time. Ralph Anderson's been around a long time. I didn't realize they were as Texas centric as they are, which is why I know them. I'm down there, but they clearly, if you look at their stuff, they're very Texas centric. SGR, actually the founder of that organization, I used to work together way back when. The person at Raftelis, we worked in the same city back in the at the beginning of my career. So, I mean, to some respects, I know all these firms. I think partially it's what fits with this group, right? Because it's going to be important that there's a consensus with y'all as a body in the process and the firm. So I don't know if formal, unless you feel you need more firms in there, I don't know, just going and doing a whole formal RFP is absolute. If there's something that this tells you that you want to ask these firms or get additional information, I think that would be reasonable. If you decide you want to narrow it down to a couple of them and have them come make a presentation, I'm certain that they would do that. Would be my experience. That'd be where I could add. Again, this is, it's hard sitting in my spot here. I can tell you I've been through a process with Mercer, Ralph Anderson, and SGR in my career, as well as a couple others. So the stuff they talk about, they make you do, they do these online interviews where they give you, they just all of a sudden you got to sit in front of a computer. It's gotten more sophisticated, and then they shoot 5 questions at you and you've got 60 seconds a question. And, it's kind of how do you operate under that scenario? They don't really give you that much lead. Now, if you've done your job and you've read the position profile, you should be pretty prepared. I'm going to tell you that's just, you've got a copy of the position profiles, right? They all use kind of the same format. It doesn't change a whole lot. What'll be really critical is the input from the council and from the staff as to what's that next candidate look like. Again, when I came here, financials and the issues around the financials and the integrity of the financial system were critical, right? So you probably didn't want to hire somebody that had, that really works in, where there's lots of social outreach needs. That's a big focus when the financials aren't in good order, right? So I think our financials are in good order now, right? You don't want somebody to come in and mess that up. I don't. But you got good financials. You've got a good organization. You all know what the future projects are coming up. I think it's going to be critical to find a partner to help you select that. And you got a lot of information here. The mayor's done quite a bit of background for you. It's how do you want to, move it forward at this point? Again, I think the question was asked about a search firm. Obviously, there's a lot of pluses to that. It comes with some cost. I don't think these amounts are unreasonable. Again, I'm going to say no matter who you use here, you're probably in about that. I know they've got this plus and this one does this and this does this, and what 30,000 is about. I think what I said before, they're actually a little better than I would have estimated in cost. But some of your costs are going to come in. Well, where do your candidates come from? Right. And what kind of things are you going to do around the advertising for candidates and, those types of situations. So.
Right. And a lot of that in the proposals, though, they walk through like what is included and what's not. The search firm, if they come in, that's included in most of it, but that talks about it at the beginning. SGR, Raftelis, and GovHR, I think would be the top 3. Those 3 folks really. I know the preliminary, and I can't get too far into a process because this isn't my wheelhouse. That's why we'd be looking at these guys to walk us through a process. But I can tell you the beginning of the process is either of those firms particularly meet with the governing body even individually. They'll talk with each governing body member individually. What are you thinking are the values that we need in a city manager? What do we need to do? What are the needs of the city? What are the pros and cons here? And kind of establish what are we looking for in the next city manager, and what in for our city, and kind of go from there to come up with a game plan and a timeline. And that's why I don't have a lot of process, because depending on who we go with would probably, the process will vary. But I'm hoping, because we're in the end of April and almost May, to potentially pull the trigger and get the ball moving forward on.
I appreciate all your work. The challenge is you've had 2 ears and 2 eyes look at all the information and speak with people and so forth. I agree, going back to an RFP would probably be less advantageous. I wish it would have been done at the beginning, because we're talking about a pretty good sum of money to keep things public. And I think it would be good to have a team of yourself and 2 other council people, that at least 2 other council people, if not all in front of all of us, maybe pick 3 or 4 companies to make presentations to us. Because to me, the most important thing is the person at that firm that we'd be dealing with. And so I know that some of them, they've assigned somebody to the account. That's the person I want to talk to. That's the person I want to talk to us, not the president of the company or whatever, or their marketing division. So due to the time that we burnt a lot of the candle, I would say pick 3 or 4 companies and schedule them to at a workshop or something, do some kind of a Zoom where we could interact with them, or just pick 2 of the council people and you, and I just think there's great value to having more than 2 ears and 2 eyes on this type of thing.
I couldn't agree more. I'm just concerned about our timeline now, and I really wish we could have, I guess, had this insight, start this 2 months ago and do this information in front of us. But when's your last day, Mike?
It's scheduled for July 21st.
So here we are,
We've got 3 months.
that's right around the corner. Do we have time? I mean,
Well, I would think if we had like 2 people and the mayor that could video conference with and kind of weed things down, because it's somebody I would like, 2 other people may think they suck, and so I think there's great value in having more than 2 eyes and 2 ears on and so I seems to me maybe because of time to pick 3 or 4 tonight, pick 2 council members to interview these companies and interact with the companies that could come back with recommendations at the next meeting.
I mean, if you had it down to 2 or 3, I'm just saying, I think you could fairly easily have them make a presentation at your meeting next week. But
So
but
they
if
would
you wanted
fly
to do
in,
it
or they'd
before-
do a virtual?
I think you just have to see what they would do. I mean, some of these, quite honestly, I think most of them would probably attend in person. They probably have the person or persons that are going to work on the projects. The 3 that the mayor mentioned, I'll just take those 3, Raftellus, Gov, HR, and SGR. They have representatives and or projects already they do have projects in the area, or have or do, right? And so it may be around something they're already doing. I don't know.
so could we pick 3 tonight and then reach out to those 3 and have them present, hopefully next 2 weeks, to all of us?
I'm just saying that's I mean, or have a subgroup or whatever works for you. I'm just, these people
Could
are
call
in,
a special
they are
meeting,
in the
too.
business to do this, so.
What's that?
We could call a special meeting and kind of line them up in, a 1 hour sequence or something like that and have them spill their guts.
That way, because if we waited for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think what these guys are thinking is how long is it before we actually move forward with it? Where if we
Yeah.
did a special meeting, we could.
Certainly,
potentially
that's fine.
move forward sooner.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Are you guys comfortable with inviting Raftellus, GovHR, and SGR?
I think the first one and then the last one on the list, for sure.
Raftellus and SGR?
How do you say that?
Raftell.
Raftellus, it's a hard, I don't know why they picked that name, but,
Yeah, you don't forget it though.
No, it's true.
Tell us an SGR for sure,
Well,
right?
you're a special.
Then what was the other one?
GovHR was the other one, and they were, started out a little bit lower, in the price, but then it just seemed those 3 companies seemed to stand out as far as the vetting and the process and just a more comprehensive, pulled together approach. Those are the 3. SGR, started a little bit lower with the not to exceed, but those 3, it seemed like just were more comprehensive, but then on top of that had more, especially Raftellus and SGR had more Kansas in the metropolitan area references.
I will say that I probably pronounce Miss Voorhees, who's the president of GovHR, she used to have her own firm as well, so. Been around the business for a while.
The name bugs me, but sounds like we're going to be working with Mr. Biden or something.
Yeah, I didn't see this last attachment to that email. I've seen the other 2, but not this. So which one did you say was the third one you was thinking?
GovHR was the other one.
You have HR? Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys are open to it, they just seemed, those seemed like they were the most pulled together, comprehensive, and had the most Midwest
Yep.
reach, specifically with the outside too.
I agree with that.
One of them's almost all exclusively West Coast.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one it was, but
GMP was, and then Ralph Anderson were both kind of coastal. Ralph Anderson, I think had a lot of California, Texas, and then Florida.
Yeah, it will help us.
moving costs would be a little severe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd have to talk them into it.
So you're looking at Raftellus, GovHR, and SGR.
If they're
Some liver
available.
from the left coast.
They wanted a job, they gotta do it.
2 left coasts.
But these guys actually are closer here and more oriented to this.
Yeah, they've worked a lot more in their, at least as far as the cities and references they gave me. And then again, just with my experience in working through the county administrator search, is a lot of the people that they brought in for interviews were from their previous reach and from the people that are in their resources to reach out to. And so I thought that was beneficial in looking at the Midwest.
Well, the SGR has a whole bunch in the middle of the country. And we've got Ottawa, Shawnee, Great Bend, Parkville, Leawood, Monette. It's not French, it's Monette. Hutchinson, Iola, Joplin, Mission Hills, Lenexa, Cameron, Coffeyville, Nixa. This is at GSR, and Smithville and Springfield. So there's a nice mix of smaller towns in there.
You say that's GovHR?
No, that's not Biden's one. That's
So Councilman Adams, are you proposing then those 3 to come in hopefully in 2 weeks, represent themselves at a council meeting? Is that what you're thinking?
I think I'm okay with those 3, but I think the other thing is to have a special meeting so that we can make a decision
Just
at the
focus on-
next council meeting.
Okay.
somebody to
Monday.
interview at a special meeting and
Between-
then make the,
yeah,
so that way we're ready to move
Next
forward.
Monday, 2 weeks.
Gonna do next,
Yeah.
next Monday evening. Everybody
Yeah.
okay for next Monday evening? For a special meeting?
Next Monday evening?
Mike, do you feel like that it was?
What would work for you? You're probably the hardest.
Well, that's gonna have to be after, for the race, 2 weeks.
That's 8.
Yeah, we can't wait. Well, we could wait that long, but
Well,
I don't know if we want
want
to.
you to have to wait on me, but.
When's the race, in 2 weeks?
May 6th.
6 and
The
7.
race is in 2 weeks.
Yeah, races.
Would you be able to make the next council meeting?
Yeah.
Would you trust the rest of us?
Well, sure,
We could probably.
not
Zoom
Garrett,
in.
but the rest of them.
Yeah, man. It's just your night, Gary.
So just so I understand, so that the leaning is towards holding a special meeting next Monday to obtain, because we'll just want to make sure we
Yeah.
publish or whatever. So special meeting of the council next Monday to interview these firms and put them in 1 hour blocks and then use that to make a decision on May 8th meeting to make a final selection.
Yeah, that the council could make a recommendation.
And then do you,
Right.
It's only
and I
30
don't
minutes.
care, do you want,
Wow.
I mean, I know the mayor's, I don't know what contacts you had, it's been in person or emails or whatever.
That's what we did.
I mean, if you want us to reach out, I mean, I don't have a
45
problem
minutes.
doing that if you want.
And most
Somebody,
of the-
somebody needs to make the decision of who's gonna contact them.
They're available.
Right.
Because we might reach out
Right.
and none of them are available. And
Sure.
so I think let's try for Monday and
Okay.
then, and go from there and then we'll just keep
Yeah,
everybody.
that's
on
race
board.
week for me, but you schedule it for next Monday. I'll try it. I may be late, but I'll be here.
Well, we could, if you have to be distant, maybe we could zoom you in.
Yeah.
But I'll try to be here.
Mike, we could do, I don't think we need an hour. I think there'd just be a lot of rehashing what they've said, because when we
Right.
did it for the buildings, we didn't use an hour,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think 30 minutes would probably be fine. I mean, they should be able to get all their bloviating in 30 minutes. Lack of a better word.
I mean, we probably want to block them in like 45-minute blocks, then 30 minutes, and then
Right.
Give us
there's a little
break.
bit, but also one can get out, the next one can get in, so. These people all know each other.
And then
right?
would
They're
we
not
set-
surprised.
But
They're
we
not gonna be
create some
surprised.
time after they're done and gone, then we talk or.
That's what I would think.
Yeah, after all 3 of the interviews, then we can
Yeah.
talk
use
about
our
it.
scorecards.
There you go. Sounds good.
So do you want, again, I know what do you want me to reach out to them tomorrow, or were you gonna reach out to them? I don't
Either
care.
way, I can, shoot an email to whoever's replied to me.
Okay.
And so that since it's been in there and then
Sure.
they're available and then we'll just make sure everybody knows.
Okay.
I think it would.
If
be
you want to
important
copy me
talk
on
about
that,
the-
then that
Absolutely.
way I can, so whatever we need to do to facilitate or whatever, if you can just
Yes.
copy me, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'd say that probably if you could get all 3 of them at the same time, then you could call a special meeting.
Yeah.
Just don't call a special meeting until you know you can.
Yeah.
We need it. Okay.
Because yeah, special meeting, just, I mean, right?
Yeah, we have to have 3 of us.
But a special meeting has to be for the single topic, which, right, that's what it would be.
And doesn't it have to have 3 of us request it, or?
I think that is, but we
Isn't
can,
that the way it
we'll
is?
prepare,
That sounds like
we'll
it.
prepare the document. That's what we've done in the past, right? There's at the time of the special meeting, then
Is that public
each of you
attendance?
sign a
It's an open
document.
meeting.
Yeah, it's-
We can make that part work. We'll take care of the logistics of the
Okay.
special meeting.
Okay.
The-
It could be a workshop. It
the
doesn't have to be a
interviews won't
special
be on a-
meeting, but I
on
mean,
a Special meeting, will they?
huh?
The interviews won't be on a special meeting.
No.
No, you're talking about interviews of candidates,
When we interview the people,
the candidates or
No.
these
Three.
people?
The search
3
forms?
companies.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
they'll be in
public.
public.
But it's a special meeting.
Okay.
It-
But
I,
open to the public.
yeah, I think you just do it as a special meeting and be open to the public, right? If it's, now, when you get down to interviewing candidates, you'll do all that through the executive session
I
process.
just think we need to do it the most public way we can possibly do it.
So the special meeting would be, is in 1.03.003.
Yeah.
B, special meeting. Special meetings may be called by the mayor or acting mayor on the written request of any 3 members of the city council. specifying the object and purpose of such meetings, which request shall be read at the meeting and entered at length on the journal. So I think what, Mike, you're saying is you can go ahead and announce it tonight. We can provide notice that it will be called, but the written request would actually be signed immediately before the meeting and then read at the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've done this. We have a form.
Yeah, we
that we've
kind of
done.
prepared the
Yeah.
standard, like the written request
Okay.
form, because
Yeah.
the date is actually kind of nebulous at this point because we don't know the availability of the firms. So once we have the availability of the firms, then we can set the date among the group, and then when we're ready to, at the beginning of that meeting, essentially have the vote to call the special meeting at that time and then conduct the special meeting. So if it
Are
is
we talking about 6 o'clock? Is that what time we're talking about, or what time we're talking
Whatever works for you.
How's your schedule?
I know I'm trying to be here.
You can be here anytime.
about? Garrett?
Could try starting a
Maybe.
little bit
I'm
early.
retired.
Margaret, what time does she get up? 5?
I don't know if it's 5 or a little earlier. I don't know.
So 6?
I thought she's a little earlier.
Yeah, why don't we, and we'll check with
I don't know.
availability, why don't we kind of look at 6-ish? And then if we can move it up to save some time, a little bit, since we're looking at maybe 3 hours.
And if you like, we could, sandwiches or pizza or something if you want, just have something here. So you don't have to worry about food. It'd be something simple like that, right? Just small sandwiches that we get from one of the sandwich shops, and chips or drink or for pizza or something.
Yeah,
we can work out
get
the details.
worked out,
Okay.
But kind of pencil them in.
We don't want to spoil you too much because then you'll want food every meeting. So.
They do it at the UG.
So I think we don't need to vote on anything, we kind of have consensus to move forward and, move along with the meeting.
Thank you.
City manager report.
Well, you have our overall report. I would just add a few things for you. I already touched on the sales tax election dates. Like I said, we'll be probably coming back at May 8th around the sewer contract, and they'll be doing it simultaneously at the UG. So we've been meeting with the Director of Public Works and some of his crews over time. The 98th Street project, the bid date got moved up a little bit. I think I talked about this. It is set for August 23rd. So they sent it out to bid in July. Its bid date is August. And then generally it's about a 60 days after bid date before they can start work. So it's probably going to be a fall, winter started project. Now that doesn't mean things like utilities, those types of things don't move forward, right? Some of it's already been done. Right of way clearing, stuff like that. But as far as the contractor who's doing the road work, whoever that will be, that's the dates. Those are set, and we tried to move them, but that's where we're at. And I know we've talked about this, but I'm not sure where everybody's at, so I just want to make sure we're all. So we hired our construction manager, Fogel Anderson. One of their projects, one of ours, was to go put out RFQ for architects. We have done that. Those are due back this next week for the architectural piece of our contract. And so we will need, and this may be something, Mary, you and I can talk. It would be nice. Myself and the architect, myself and the construction manager, but maybe a couple others from this body or something that might be willing. I don't know how many we'll get to review, because remember that's the next phase in this process. And right now we're kind of tentatively scheduling for that to come before the council on the 22nd for the action of that.
May 22nd.
Yeah, and then that gets us to the first phase, which again, the first phase of our overall project is to look at basically determining our path. What's our best path, right? Because we don't want to keep going around to different paths. We need to make that selection, and that's really what we've tagged both the construction manager and ultimately an architect to do, so they can put dollars and cents and options and programs, and we can say, that's the way we want to move this forward. Then we'll start getting into the detail stuff again. And that's on line with what we require the construction manager details. And then the last thing, we have made a tentative offer that has been accepted for our new accounting manager. So we're doing the background. We actually used a firm to help us make this, to get us candidates. And so that's been, I mean, there's some cost, but it's been effective, I think, for us. Actually, the person who heads up that firm, just by pure chance, is the sister-in-law of Brian Smith. For those people that know, Brian used to serve on our planning commission. So just got to talk at Edwardsville, one of those kind of deals. So they've done a good job for us, but I'm telling you, it is a very tough hiring market out there. I mean, just to get candidates, and so it's a challenge. I know we'll probably talk about that. I believe, I think that's all the things I have, other than what you already have about the quiet zone. And we also have an RFP out for the demolition services for the building. Again, we plan on that being a May 22nd item, because those won't come in until after our next meeting or right before. And they should be out of the building by the end of this month. That's what they notified us. So I think that's all I have for now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Knight?
Nothing.
Zach, did you have any reports? Chief Matthews? Chief Whittem? CE?
Yeah.
All right. Councilman Scott?
I don't have anything. We have our NASCAR race weekend up in Kansas City a couple weeks at the end of May 6th and 7th. We have our traffic meeting this Thursday. So I'll try to get in the middle of that and find out if there's going to be any impact to our traffic on that north end. I don't foresee that happening again, but we'll see, because the traffic is a little different nowadays than it used to be. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Councilman Malott?
Traffic.
I think I'll pass tonight.
Councilman Bishop?
Yeah, I got a couple questions about the Johnson County, Wyandotte County Mayors Association. We don't belong to that anymore, do we?
No.
Correct? Can I ask a question? Why?
So you can. When I talked to Mike about that before, they're a meeting of mayors on Wednesday evenings, and I was unable to attend. I talked to Mike about it before we dropped it and said, hey, is there any other reason that any other benefit from it? And he said, no, not really. So I figured we'd save the city money instead of paying for me to go out to eat once a month, and keep that in the general fund.
Okay. Did you actually say that, Mike?
Well, I think our discussion, I think my point was, if we're going to be, I think all of these organizations are good organizations.
Yes.
We have to participate and be active in them. So I think there's value in that meeting. And if we're not going to take advantage of it, then I think then there's a question of, we're not going to participate, be active. And do you want to spend the money? I think that was the discussion we had generally, was whether you be able to attend and could we be active in it. So, and I think there was some.
They just had a schedule conflict, and so it didn't make sense to spend the city money for.
So we don't have a voice in two counties then,
Well, there's
correct?
no.
There's benefit to networking. Chuck and I were in Hays, Kansas last weekend. We talked to several people about hiring their city manager. And it was pretty interesting how tough it was for a couple of the cities. But does this tie in with us being able to sit, the mayor sitting on the board of Mark? Because I know that Mayor McTaggart sat on it as president of it, and that brings in a lot of revenue for us. I know it has in the past, right?
Well, there's the Wyandotte, so it's the Johnson-Wyandotte County Council of Mayors, which is an organization of mayors in the two counties. I'm not attentive, but I mean, they're primarily to obviously exchange ideas among mayors. They have some powers around recommendations to Mark, as an example, for small city representation. So Mark is a board made up of, I don't know, 30 or 40 members. So they do make recommendations to various boards and committees as a group. But then the Mark board is a separate entity. Obviously, Mark sets, I mean, all federal funds in this region go through there. A lot of the programs 911, the STP stuff that we do, total transportation that Mr. Adams sits on, the bike ped committees, the various things. So in Wyandotte County, I believe there is 4 members on, I'm going by, I'm trying to remember. I think there's 4 members on the Mark board. So that has to be elected officials, right? Those are all elected officials. And I believe Kansas City, so the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, is one member, and then they appoint 2 others from there. And then there's a small city representative that comes from the other cities other than Kansas City, Kansas, which traditionally has been Edwardsville and Bonner. I mean, the last round, Mayor McTaggart was the member, and I believe Mayor Harrington was the alternate, and I believe that's how it is still today. I mean, he's still the alternate. I
think Mayor Harrington's the lead now. Because he asked when, at least that was my understanding in the email communication, is he was wanting to be since he was the alternate for so long, was wanting to be the.
Okay. I don't know if that got updated or not. But so generally our mayor, the 2 mayors of our cities, Bonner and Edwardsville, serve collectively on that board.
And to answer the question, I still do make appointments to the Mark board. In fact, just recently, we reappointed Mr. Councilman Adams to that TTPC board. So that's.
Well, it's only $350, right? To join
For
the Wyandotte County, Johnson County Mayor's Association, correct?
I'm not certain of that fee. I don't know for certain. I don't remember. I don't know what it is. I assume it's fairly about that. Yeah. I don't know what the exact amount is on that. That sounds about right.
Well, in my business, networking is it's not everything, but it's helpful. And in our business, when we go to different cities or whatever and network with these other people, I just think it's a mistake not being there. That's all I have to say about it. I mean, can you send a representative besides the mayor? Any elected official could go?
They were pretty clear when I was there that it was specifically for mayors.
Well, I know that's what
I know it can't be. I know it can't be. I know it can't be a staff member, right? So it can't be an appointed person. I mean, it can't be. I mean, because when they even hold their meeting, or at least again, when they held meetings, even here one time, I mean, the staff went and prepared things, but then it's kind of I don't want to say a closed, but I mean, it's an elected officials meeting. It's not really designed for staff. I mean, they talk about legislative agendas. I mean, the council of mayors, they talk about, what's happening there. They may talk about issues. I mean, they invite people to come in and speak to them. I've never attended one other than, I mean, I think several of us attended their annual Christmas event, which they open that up to everybody to.
Yes. When I was there, they had representatives make a presentation, and people ate while they were giving the presentations, and then everybody went home. So it's networking just like you can anywhere else. I feel like, it's the mayor's prerogative. If I cannot be there, I don't want to waste city money on it. Y'all know I don't like to spend money needlessly. If that's something that opens up later, then I can. course, you're welcome to send me an email with these questions anytime if you'd like to.
I prefer not to do email. So I
Okay.
hate that
Okay.
stuff.
All right.
So so can we find out, where can we look it up or whatever to see who all can go to this thing?
I can do the research. I mean, there's again, there's a mayor, I believe it's Mr. Walters, Mayor Walters, because we were talking about PPC or whatever. So I think he's with Westwood, I believe. It changes each year. So, a mayor, each year there's a new chair, and they changed the rules a few years ago. It used to be that there was one person who was kind of assigned as the secretary for Lagman, and I believe she was a staff member for the city of Overland Park or Olathe, one of the two O's. And so when they changed chairs, the same person was still taking care of the administrative, and she retired. And so then whoever the mayor is, that staff person is that staff is whether it's a city clerk or it may be an administrator, it may be somebody serves in that, but I can reach out and find out what the rules or the bylaws say, or I don't know off the top of my head.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I can
Thank
certainly
you.
reach that out and I'll send it to the council.
That's it.
Councilman Adams.
I do know a lot of mayors send council members in their place, so if they're not able to make it or if they just have other arrangements. I did notice that we've got this new code violation report online. This would be great to put in our newsletter, because I would really like to see our citizens a little bit more active, and a little bit more proud of their city, and hold other people
I think it was in
accountable.
the last hot shot, but we've kind of got posts scheduled throughout the spring too, to just kind of drop it in and let folks know
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's
So I think it's a great thing, because a lot of times people will do this, take 10 minutes and do this, where they don't want to come down here, fill out a form and all that kind of stuff. So holding your neighbor, there's nothing wrong with holding your neighbor accountable for the quality of the city you live in. So,
We'll probably get, not to interrupt, but I mean, a lot of our, the code enforcement activity is still driven by phone calls. I mean, that we'll still accept that
Mhm.
as a means to report a potential violation. So this is just another kind of avenue for folks to.
yeah, 11 o'clock at night, you can
Yeah, right.
pull it up and fill it out. Chief Whittam, so you guys took quite a trip to fight some field fires, didn't you?
Yes, sir. We worked at for Dusty Stan's house, so before public works.
Great.
Oh, Dusty.
Took the the brush truck with you?
Yes, sir.
You want to, why don't you just get just briefly about our association with the wildland fire, how we get engaged in that?
If you remember 5 years ago, Governor Brownback unfunded mandate, every county had to have a volunteer task force because we burned up half of western Kansas. People in Colorado, Oklahoma, and Nebraska, because we got outside the state containment license. So in the metro, between Wyandotte and Johnson County, the chiefs of the two counties said, well, instead of each one trying to form one, let's merge one. So we brought it in here to sign into the pact that participated us into the Johnson County Wildland Task Force. We are the only representatives of Wyandotte County. So what happens is we get besides the annual upkeep and everything else on the training and the equipment wise, we're put onto state level mobilizations. Now, the city's directive at the time was work intrastate. We will only go inside the boundaries of the state of Kansas. We do not do any western deployments where the rest of the task force will go California, Oregon, Washington, Montana. So we've had, this is the third deployment that we've had. We've participated in mitigation projects before. We've had stand-up deployments that just stayed right here in town. We, as well as Sumter, Sedgwick County, are kind of the preferred task forces now for the Kansas Forest Service, especially with our fire management officer we have, because of the training level and the work caliber that we have brought out on the scenes. So we took one task force leader with one alternate 2 engine bosses. And then we had 5 Type 6 Wildland engines, are equivalent to ours, heavy tender and heavy brush. We were supposed to have been actually going to Dodge City when the weather conditions had changed. We were checking in at Manhattan before we were going out to Dodge City. They're like, oh, we got to start up here in Manhattan. Like I said, we pulled in there, an hour and 20 minutes later, it was already 14 or 1,500 acres. They had already assessed 2 single air engine air tankers. We'd already lost 6 structures in the community when we pulled in. So they had school buses lined up because they were making a decision whether they were going to evacuate the community or not. So we spent most of Thursday afternoon, Thursday night establishing a fire containment line. They flew over 100,000 gallons of airdrops Thursday night before the sun went down. We worked through midnight, 1 o'clock on Friday morning. Took about a 5-hour siesta on the fire line. Was right back up on Friday morning. State had pulled into Black Hawk and Family Buckets. They had dropped over 100,000 gallons of water, reiterating and reinforcing the fire break that we established in the fire line. As everybody knows, we had a weather front moving through that Friday night. We had 60-mile-an-hour quarter winds and had no rain, not lightning strikes. We all got pelted with rain and hail and everything else here. We had nothing out there. We worked through till Saturday afternoon, and we finally got 2 more engine resources from Kansas Forest Service and Police Task Force to come back. We went back onto a ready call about 4 hours ago. We couldn't back here. So Dusty called me on Friday. So I just saw the truck driver through town. I'm down here at Dad's where you sitting at him, like I'm sitting on this hilltop. Overlooking the silo, and the old school and City Hall is right there in front of me. By about a quarter of a mile, he's like, "You're sitting on a golf course." I'm like, "No golf course up there." I walked back that Friday night. I'm like, "Yeah, I was sitting on the golf course." So, like I said, he ended up losing 7 structures. 4 were damaged. 4 additional were damaged beyond livability. 4 were damaged but livable. No loss of life. It ended up being over 1,700 acres. It was a state declared disaster within an hour of the outbreak for it. We got mobilized from Manhattan. That was the 6th declared state FMAG declared fire that day. So task forces were running pretty thin and sparse throughout state of Kansas. So, we still have no record coverable large amount of rainfall in western Kansas. They had less than a quarter of an inch in the last 70 days. It is now compared to the Dust Bowl of the Great Depression. We're watching red flag warnings every day go up, so we're having almost daily calls with Forest Service. We're just anticipating a bad fire season. So, but on the side point, we have taken over close to $20,000 in state forestry grants almost every year between there, including the delivery of the small unit for the UTV. So part of that, ties back into our willingness to deploy with our neighbors. When we do deploy with a brush truck, depending upon if it's the brush truck need or not. So the week before, half the task force was in the Cottonwood complex fire. And that was all dealt with all Johnson County units because we kind of split the task force in half. So, we have several task force qualified leaders, including myself. We have several engine bosses, including myself. And then a lot of the worker bees go out, so we have to have so much resources to go out when we do it. So we try to split so no one agency is going every time. But the minute that we get the notification, Bonner is immediately put on any brush fire calls that we have here. So their truck is initially dispatched with ours, so we're not down, we're not having any access to the brush truck when we're gone. And then, like I said, my captains pick up the ball, since we're in lieu of not having a deputy chief right now, pick up the ball and carry on everything. And I contact them usually in the morning and at night before I'm getting on the fire line.
Thank you for the update. That's pretty awesome. It's great to be a part of something like that. And that's a great, now that you mentioned, I do remember that agreement, and that you made us proud. Thank you for your service to our state and such a high level of credentialing. And
Yeah, but I'm sure the washing machine didn't like when I come back.
And we we do get a certain amount of reimbursements for those
Right.
expenses, we utilize some of our part-time firefighters, people like that, versus, so we maintain our resources here for our, it's not like we all leave and there's nobody at the fire station.
It never crossed my mind. With Chief
but-
Whittam running the department,
Yeah.
that would have never crossed my mind. So I just am really thankful that we have that kind of reputation and service level in that industry. So thank you very
8
much.
years ago, I'd never thought we got invited for anything like that. So there's been some big strides. The department here has brought that caliber up to the line.
Well, it's good leadership. Thank you very much.
It's just interesting as the world goes, that where did the fire start but in Haddam, and where did it start on Dusty's father's farm?
Oh,
So, I mean, the odds of that are just, he called me too, and he was on his, because I'd heard about it from the chief, and he was on his way from wherever he was at to back to home to, because he's a volunteer firefighter, right? So he was heading home to help to.
Just curiosity, was that mostly like forest or fields, or was there livestock lost? And
When we left, there was still no official count on if there was any livestock lost. It smelled like there was probably a couple. It's a very sick smell. Usually they can keep you out. So we had everything from growing prairie grass that was in excess of 6 feet tall to cedar thickets that were thicker than the bayous of Louisiana.
that's
So
a pheasant territory.
yeah, we took down some trees that were larger than 3.5 feet in diameter, probably aged, yes, 150 to 180 years old, creating that block. So we have a lot of heavy dozers and, like I said, the air assets. But again, the prairie grass led into the thickets. So it's like most western Kansas. You got thickets that just pop up here and there, and then they just fuel the fuel load. And it seems like the more dense we have the smaller towns, communities, where we have all the cedar thickets and brush thickets and stuff. We just don't have. It goes back to the point that we try to recommend experience for everybody on the north end of town, because, like I said, it didn't take long for houses to put it disappear. And I mean, a lot of it was just what they wasn't even directly not ready to start it. Thank you.
make us really proud. Thanks. That's all I have.
I'll keep it pretty brief. Mike, I had a resident reach out to me recently and just ask what our policy is as far as city vehicles leaving the city, like taking a vehicle home for lunch break, a city vehicle outside city limits for lunch breaks. Do we have policies regarding that?
Well, we do have take-home policy. I mean, I guess that would depend on who or what. I mean, our chiefs obviously have their vehicles they could go to or from home. But I mean, if it was just a typical employee, I mean, I'd probably have to know a little bit more about it. Of course, somebody may, I mean, typically I would say no, just to go home for a lunch break in a city vehicle. Typically, I would say would be uncommon. I mean, unless, but
It might
maybe
just be
some-
a good reminder to
yeah.
staff or employees
Right.
that residents are noticing, specifically city vehicles
Yeah.
out leaving the city on a regular basis for
Yeah.
lunch break.
I mean, you know, one of the things I don't, you know, our police officers may, you know, they'll go, to get vehicles cleaned, we have to go to Bonner Springs. They potentially could eat, you know, but they're on
This is
duty and they're
to
still on
residents,
response. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
we won't get
All
into
right.
it too much, but
No, no,
well,
okay.
maybe there's something I don't know, so, yeah, maybe just a quick
we'll
reminder. to
we'll
staff
follow
to
up
keep it.
on it internally.
I was gonna see if we could utilize the digital sign, for upcoming events, the citywide garage sale coming up, maybe put it at some of the key intersections to remind folks that citywide garage sale, and then after that, of course, the cleanup and some of the things that are coming up. May is gonna be a busy month for us. And then the last thing I've got is I'll just mention that people do things a little bit differently. I am not one that shows up every time there's a free meal somewhere to rub elbows with politicians. It's just not my style. In the last year or so, I fought hard alongside county to get sci-fi back, which we just heard we got $100,000 in. I worked on the county administrator search process. I fought like crazy to get our city money for ARPA. This year, we can have advanced elections in Edwardsville. I worked pretty dang hard in the last year. And so I would just like to remind folks that sometimes people maybe do things a little bit differently. But this is my seat and this is my role, and I take it really seriously. So I'll leave it at that. Have a good night.
Okay. Can you send me Ryan, a copy of what we sent?
Somebody must have had a Tootsie Roll.
Tootsie
I
Roll,
thought maybe you brought that in with you.
No,
Just so I have.
Can you bring that in?
Thank you.
I hate going on.
afraid to pull filling out of my mouth.